Good morning, everybody. Thanks for popping in here. I'm gonna send a thing to Tom for him to join us.
um, for contributor. Hey, there he is.
Hey, did I do it right?
You did it right.
What does this do?
How's it going?
Uh,
That I think you swapped your camera.
okay.
So thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It's early for me.
I know it is. When I was putting it together, I was like, ooh, he's gonna actually have to set an alarm for this out there on the West Coast, which is no
Yeah.
problem.
If I look straight on, it's good. But if I turn my head, you can see that's just like straight dead
I straight from the bed to Instagram Live. That is the future that we built for
head.
ourselves here. I'm just gonna do a quick thing. So we went live with the Seed and Spark campaign a week ago, and now we are at 40% funded in the first week. So we have a little bit to go, and if you're joining in and you'd like to contribute to it, you can go to seedandspark.com/fortifiedfilms, I believe, and I will. If Tyler or Scott or Ross, the other producers, are on and want to drop that in the comment section for people, otherwise it's in the bio of this account here. Hello, Dan Scooble. Good to see you joining us today, and Tyler. So why am I talking to Tom Kauffman as he settles on which filter he wants to use? Well, Tom and I went to high school together. And we graduated from high school in 2001. And Muskegon started a film festival that year, and they had a high school competition. So I wrote and directed a short film that we submitted and that played there called Refund, and Tom starred in it. Also, Tom has been a working professional in TV. What do we say? Since 2008, is it? 2008,
Well,
2009?
it gets blurry when you like. When does the internet meet the television?
That's
because
true.
it was doing webisodes for TV shows, but I wasn't working for
Right.
anything that was broadcast on television. but then I guess commercials also for that show. Community.
Yeah, Community. There was a commercial on live TV telling viewers to go to nbc.com/whatever to watch a Community webisode that I recorded on a old Droid phone to upload to a site like Vimeo to share with you. So that's a little history. So we'll go through that. We'll just chat. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop it. We'll be on here for a few minutes, and yeah. So Refund. The basic story was it's like a bunch of Tom's character wanted to was sick of being kicked around in life and was sinking his money into playing the lotto, always lost, and so he decided he wanted to get a refund from the establishment that sold him the lotto tickets. None of this is how the lotto or any of this works, but what did I know? I was 18. We actually hand waved it off though. I did know enough to do that. I did a montage of Tom's character explaining it to the rest of us on how it was going to work, and we were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So we shot that at a little place called Pick and Pack in Muskegon, Michigan. And I walked in and I said, hey, could we shoot a movie here after you guys close on a Saturday night? And they said, what? And I was like, no, we want to shoot it here. Can we just do it while you're wrapping up for the night? And he said, yeah, I guess so. So we had an hour to shoot it. Someone told me that they were listening to the police scanner at the time, and there was hey, there might be some robbers going on at Pick and Pack right
Who
now.
told you that?
And then It was a relative. They're like, I was listening to the police scanner, as one does. And they're like, and I heard that call come in or something. I don't know if it was true. There's no way in there.
I mean, in the community
verify that.
we
But
grew
Tom,
up in, yeah, I think someone probably called the cops for nothing.
mhm.
If I
Oh
had
yeah,
to venture, I guess.
and the Northern Shores police officers are probably like, oh yeah, sure, we'll go check that out. We got nothing else going on. I never saw a police car that night. Maybe someone else did. But do you remember anything from shooting that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember never thinking I was a good actor to begin with, and then feeling as I was acting that I was doing a very bad job, but also kind of thinking like the whole movie's going to be bad, so why does it matter? That's the first thing that comes to mind. I was sort of blown away. It was like a feat of producing that, like, I guess you were like 17 and you walked into a store and said, we'd like to shoot here. And they were like, okay, yeah. I mean,
yeah. They're like, why not?
That easy, usually.
Yeah, no, we shot all like that Saturday, I remember. And I had like a little Hi8, not even digital camcorder at the time. It was like a little Hi8 cassette tape. And to edit it, I remember it was Super Bowl Sunday because we had in high school, Tom and I had a broadcast class, and the teacher was Mr. Drosky, and he seemed like an adult to me at the time, but I think later it clicked when I was an adult that he was only 25, and it was his second year.
Well, I remember he complained about his ex-girlfriends to us, high school students, but like with the feeling, you know, like it wasn't like a fun anecdote. Like he was going through like the angst of someone who was like the age of like the main characters and girls at that time.
He was, we were closer in age than many people that worked at the school at the time. So I imagine he was just like, hey, these guys. But he came in, and I remember it was Super Bowl Sunday because he made mention of that multiple times. Like we had to shoot, we shot on Hi8, whatever. Then I had to transfer it to a VHS, and then we used 2 VCRs to edit it. And he multiple times he was like, I have a hard out at like 3 because I have to go to a Super Bowl party with my best friend who I only see like once a year, and I see you guys every day. And I was like, yeah, fair.
Why did he say yes?
Because he was a good teacher. And then to show it to people, I had to drive and put the VHS in other people's VCRs. So it amazes me, like when my neighbor kids are just like making their short films now, and they're in like middle school and high school, and they're just shooting and editing and everything on there, and they're learning like jump cuts and everything like that. So
I have a question for you. Why did you shoot that in black and white?
Because the color ended up looking really bad. Because I didn't have anything to do. I didn't know, you couldn't change the color temperature on that little Hi8 camera that I had. Or at least I didn't know how to do it at the time. So we were shooting like in like February winter sunlight. So it was like, super bright. And then if we changed inside, the color temperatures were all different. So I was like, I know, I'll just flip this switch on this analog mixer and make it black and white. And then I could say like it was a homage to Kevin Smith and Clerks.
Oh, so you made it black and white after it was shot?
After it was shot, it was like a quick thing.
That part. Yeah, I mean, we were only 6 years removed from Clerks stealing everyone's heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did it. It was like one of those movies where I could connect with like the Gen Xers that I either knew from the cinema or this teacher. I was like, yeah, I watched all the Kevin Smith movies, and we could. I'd be like, so I know your Gen X references. But it did play at the Muskegon Film Festival, and that was cool. It was like at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, so like the ideal time to have a bunch of high schoolers to try to get out. I think get out to see it. There were a couple people beyond the cast and the crew that came. Though I remember like a few of our classmates made it out, and we did not win.
We did a Q and well, we didn't do a Q&A, but didn't we go up on stage?
We did. They did a thing where like they said like, here's the movie. Everything else was shot on digital. All these other high schools at the time were like had digital gear, and so we went back and ours sounded bad too because it was like just mono sound. So they're blowing it through playing it through the theater, and it just was like meh. People were struggling to hear it. And I, going back to the Kevin Smith thing, I wrote a lot of dialogue, I think, that probably was pretty crucial to it. So we didn't place, but they were like, oh, you can't have licensed music. So I knew a couple of people with a band, and I was like, can I just use this song? And they're like, yeah, no problem. But the video that won, or the films that like placed or whatever, all had licensed music, and one was like Star Wars Real World. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all that stuff is licensed too. Obviously, I'm not bitter because I still remember all these details. But there was a the one that won was a film called The Choice, and it was about this kid he was like a high schooler, and he saw a little kid about to get hit by the car, and his life flashed before his eyes. And it was a series of moments where he had to make the right choice, and he did. It was like someone was going to steal something, and he told the teacher, or someone was going to do something, and he did the right thing. And so the narrative, like the rest of the movie, was like, is he going to make the right choice right now? And he did, because that's what he always did. It wasn't even a question. But all the high school teachers that were judging were like, that's great.
I can hear
gave
the
him
pain
the first prize
in your voice, recounting the winner. I can hear.
I did not make the choice.
You have for the lack of a character arc. It probably looked so much better.
It looked better, and you could hear it. And the main character died, so that's how they got it. It was like a total like Academy thing. It was like, you kill off the main character, you're gonna be fine.
We were not emotionally developed enough to try anything that wasn't really bad comedy. We could have never made a semi-serious movie like that. Still probably can.
Still not.
Yeah.
Can't do it. I mean, this film Fortified is people that Ross wrote. I'll say that Ross wrote it. But it's about two people that can't communicate with one another, so they result to bits, which is also the crux of our friendship and relationship.
Not true. We do a
got there.
Great job of communicating with each other, and we do bits the whole time.
Yeah. In our 30s, there was a moment where I felt like, I was like, oh, we're starting to tell each other real things like fears and stuff like that. Instead of being like, I'm probably going to die alone, going for the laughs. So,
how old are the characters in Fortified?
They're in their like early to mid 30s. So they're like Chicago 20s. And if we set it in LA, they would be in their 40s, and that would be like, LA 20s. I have that theory that like if we lived in our hometown, we probably would have like been married and everything like in our mid to late 20s, as many people did. Then and people I know in Chicago largely got married in their like 30s. And then, now people that in LA are starting to get married that I know as they get into their late 30s, early 40s. So
interesting theory.
But speaking of that, this is an interesting theory that might not be true at all. But let's focus on you for a little bit.
Freaking finally.
That's what the people are tuning in for. Tom Kauffman. So 2008. So in the 2000s, we both were doing like sketches. You were doing stuff at Central Michigan University. They pulled you into their graduate program, which you finished, it should be noted, in a year and a half, versus the standard 2 years. And then afterwards you moved to LA. We're doing this movie kind of on our own here. It's like true independent movie, but you've been like in the whole studio streamer like system. So walk us through what your career there.
I mean, starting when?
Sorry, let's see. There's 2008. You did stuff for Community. What was your first like? I'm in a writer's room because you started.
Yeah.
When did you focus on
Well, it was
writing? When did you
interesting.
decide to focus on writing?
Yeah, so like I graduated from grad school and moved to LA and got a job as a production assistant at a reality television company. So nothing to do with writing, and I didn't really have a focus because I had like, you know, my program in college wasn't really a real television production program. It was like meant to churn out network news cameramen and at best, you know, or like local news anchors. And we made like, you know, we did sketch comedy on the campus TV station, which a lot of people do, and it was bad, which a lot of it is. And but some of it was just good enough that it got a little traction online. Before that was really, you know, that much of a thing. I mean, Jenna Marbles maybe hadn't even recorded her first video. That's how early in the internet this was world. And but you know, I had a group of friends and we had started making comedy, and I was always kind of the one who wrote it out of a lot of times out of necessity, just because like we want to do something and it has to be written. So I just like bit the bullet and was the one who would write it, or primarily write it, and other friends would, you know, we'd write it as a group, but I'd be the one at the keys. And then eventually that gave way to me just writing things on my own, kind of aimlessly, just little comedy pieces. And eventually we would shoot these as like Channel 101 pilots, which Channel 101 is also a thing that probably needs explaining, but it was the online like mini television outlet for that Dan Harmon created. It was like a film festival, but for mini TV shows. So I got really involved in that, and I was writing all of that. And it's mostly because my friend Dave was like, wanted to direct something constantly wanted to be making something. So he was always like hitting me up to write stuff. So I just started writing. Those videos that we did got a lot of attention. You know, one of the series was IKEA Heights, which always goes through a few-year cycle where Reddit finds out, you know, that we shot a soap opera, a short soap opera in IKEA Heights, or in IKEA, without permission, and it starred, you know, a much younger Randall Park at the time. So it's always interesting to go back and watch IKEA Heights and know that he was like, now he's in Marvel shows and in movies, but he was running around IKEA with us, pretending, you know, that the furniture was his house. So yeah, like stuff like that got attention. And then when, you know, pretty shortly after I moved to LA, Dan Harmon sold Community, and they were shooting the pilot. And then once Community got picked up, they approached him. And it's always weird because it's, you know, he went from like just a younger working stiff writer to someone who like Sony comes to and says, hey, we have a big budget for promotion. What do you want to do? And it's like, he's never given it any thought. So he just sort of pulled from his like bullpen of young and hungry creatives who, you know, didn't know any better, like that they should be paid more. And just was like, hey, Dave and Tom, do you guys want to make webisodes for Community? You know, come up with something, pitch it to me, pitch it to Sony. Sony's going to say yes because I'm going to say yes, and Sony has this money, so they'll just like give you the money to make it. And this was in like the era where the like Office, you know, the show The Office had like was winning whatever the equivalent of like Emmys for the web. You know, it was like, and this was like going to be a sister show. It was on NBC, and it was a primetime comedy. So like they wanted Community to have webisodes that they hoped would be as popular as the Office webisodes. So we went through actually a few years. Over the course of the first 3 seasons, Dave and I ended up making a few different short runs of webisodes. But also during that time, weirdly, like we became the go-to writers for any sort of promotional thing that like the real writers weren't being asked to do. So we also wrote like a series of Super Bowl commercials for Community.
Yeah.
That was like in sponsorship with Infinity Automobiles.
I remember that one. And you had the whole Community cast. Like, they had to do it.
Yeah, well, it was funny because, like, as the season went on, we lost a few. Like,
yeah,
they renegotiated their deals or something went foul in the inside politics of the show. So, you know, the ones that were always, like, available and so into it were, like, Gillian, Danny Pudi.
Yeah.
Yvette always wanted to be in them. But yeah, so we wrote things for Chevy and we wrote things for Joel. The Infinity, and I know we have stories about the one that you actually helped me write, but hold that thought for a minute, because I remember the Infinity commercials were so interesting because they were, you know, those came with a lot of weird parameters because it was a product and it was like a marketing teams were involved, and they approved what we wanted to do. And then we wrote them, and then I was on a call where, like, some advertising exec, it was like a notes call, some advertising exec just, like, laid into the scripts and were like, this is not funny. Basically not funny. He was the thrust of it. And then, you know, this was, like, the great side, one of the good sides of Dan Harmon was, like, he was like, oh, you know, fuck these people, like, and he was just like, now we're making them like word by word, like nothing is changing. And he just went back and was like, these are funny scripts, they're written in the tone of the show, this is what the show is, if you don't want this, you don't want the show, you know. And they were like, yeah, okay. And then we shot it, and we were like, you know, they rented out on the Paramount lot, they rented out a whole big sound stage. It was a big production. It was all shot inside a car, and all the actors had to cram inside of a car. And I remember this lady ran up to us and introduced herself, and she was like from Infinity to me and Dave. And we're just there basically at that point where the script's already written. We're not really pitching new jokes. We're just there to like see the production of it. And one of the Avengers directors was the director of it. And I remember, I think it was Joe Russo. He was doing it was Joe. He was doing a fantasy draft on his iPad while he was directing. So he was in Video Village, and they'd like do a take, and he'd just go, you know, he'd like be on his iPad, and he'd stop and go, do another one, and then he'd go back to his iPad, which was about the level of effort that everyone should have been putting into these things. So, but that's all to say that the lady who came up to me and Dave, because she knew we were the writers, and she started pitching us like very intensely pitching us, like, we need to get a version, and I wish I could remember, but it was like, let's just say one where Danny Pudi's wearing a hat. That's not it, but it was just like, we need to get one where Danny Pudi's getting a hat. Can you go talk to the director? Can you? We're gonna get one with the hat, right? Like, we have to get one with the hat. And we were like, I guess we'll mention it. And I remember Dave and I just walked over to Video Village, kind of laughing, and Harmon was over there at that point too. And we were like, hey, so she approached us and said that they need to get one where Danny's wearing a hat. We're not gonna do that, right? And Dan goes, no, we're not doing that. That's like so stupid, whatever it was. And he started being like, why would we ever? And we got through shooting, and she started like nervously pacing like toward the end of shooting. And then like once it was clear we weren't, you know, like eventually she got the hint, this hat take is not coming. She just started crying, like walking around and crying openly in the studio. And so like, I think it was very important to her job and her future employment that they got the take where Danny Pudi was wearing a hat. And I remember like feeling a little bad for her, but still being young enough and being like so poor myself. Cause like this, you know, the macro the macro framing is that this was like a very rich woman who worked in advertising who came up to young creatives to try and manipulate them to get something shot that she wanted to shot. And
I mean, mission accomplished, but
well, yeah, I guess that was the whole thrust of the campaign. And we didn't get paid very much money for it at all.
No.
So when she didn't get her way and she was stomping around crying, you know, there's two ways to deal with it. And at one point, the sympathy for her gave way to the like, oh my God, we made her cry. It was just like this weird schadenfreude for like, that's right, rich lady, rich established older lady. You don't always get your way.
It's wild. One thing is just like, it's worth checking out channel101.com and like playing around there if you've never have. Because in that like mid 2000s, like the stuff, it was like a pretty interesting scene with like, as far as like who was there, especially in the show Yacht Rock, which was co-created by J.D. Riznar, who's also from Muskegon, Michigan. But like it is, you start watching it and it was like sort of this like there was like the it was in between like the Tenacious D sort of wave of comedy, like I guess you would say alt comedy. It's like more in like the Sarah Silverman crew, but it was like this like parallel to I think like that whole like Judd Apatow like crowd that was coming up from 2005 on. This was like the more they were like the polished you know, stadium playing band, and you guys were like the punk bands playing the clubs and like getting your own following. But when you go back and look at stuff like even Yacht Rock, you're like, oh, that's that guy now, or that she, I know where she turned out to.
Yeah.
And like you had Steve Agee in one of your shows. He was narrating, Steve Agee, who's now on Peacemaker and part of the whole, you know, James Gunn DC universe, but he was a guy that narrated a show for you for free that you wrote,
yeah, I mean,
making mistakes.
Worked with all of us all the time. I mean, Randall too. Yeah, and I feel like it's you know, there's a lot of comedy scenes that pop up, and 10 years from you know, 10 years, like once everyone turns about 35, you know, a good number of those people make it to some degree. You know, you see them doing what they're doing, or like directing behind the scenes. I mean, it was like, you know, there was like occasionally like the Daniels did little segments for stuff in Channel 101 and
yeah, everything, right?
Yeah, and the show Everything.
Which was
not to be
a
confused with
Everything
thing. Everywhere All at Once, but
but maybe the title was from that.
Yeah, there's also a few, you know, like a few SNL folks also did stuff in Channel 101 before that. I think it's just, you know, by virtue of being in a part of the LA comedy scene. And it's like those people are always not like exclusive. They weren't like exclusive to Channel 101, you know, like they were also doing UCB and other stuff. But it's just, you know, it's like, it's actually a great lesson about persistence, because a lot of those people grinded for years. You know, we knew them when they were pretty young. And then when they're succeeding, it's more just like because they refuse to give up, because it's so easy, you know, it's such a easy thing to give up. It's you probably get endorphins at the idea of like when you finally give up trying to like do the comedy slog and stuff, which is why like doing Fortified is also such a lesson in persistence, and you guys pulling it together and just doing it on your own and not waiting for anyone's permission to do it, or trying to you know, you're just gonna do it no matter what. In how many weeks?
Well, we'll close this out this year. Like in this summer is when we're targeting to shoot this thing. So we are doing that. But yeah, I mean, everyone, you know, there is like the route, like there's not, and you know this as well, like just going through your story, but there's not like, you don't get a degree in some kind of discipline in the arts, and then by and large go to like, you know, the movie factory and be like, I have a college degree, can I make a movie
Right.
now? Or
Oh,
like a TV, or
someone
there's
just arrived to LA. Give them all of our movies.
yeah.
Which one do you guys have? Yeah.
And there's like so many, exactly. And there's so many. I mean, your career is a story of persistence, and us doing this, and the commonality of like everyone that we've talked to, whether it be, you know, someone that's advising us here in Chicago on the indie production side of things, or anyone at a production house, or you, is there is a, or the actors that, or Ross, or like Stevie, there is a moment, I think, where everyone has like a choice of like, I could keep going at this, or I could just like, you know, settle into something else. And that, and both are valid things. But I always say to, you know, people is like, if you can get a job doing whatever, like in the arts that you know, if someone's going to pay you and it's still not like exactly what your dream job is, but you're making a living based, you know, whether it's like graphic design, video production, writing copy for ads, you're already in the upper echelon, like of like creatives. Like you persevered to this point. And like doing this Fortified, or where you're at, you know, winning an Emmy and everything like that, is like really just a matter of like not quitting. And it sounds very Pollyanna-ish, but it's really it's like kind of the secret that I learned is like, you know, there's the very high level, which of like, you know, the superstar people whose deals get printed in deadline, and then there's just a lot of people that are in the creative work just doing it because they could do something else, but they just don't want to. They can't get rid of that itch. So it's kind of cool. So, well, we should wrap up so you can get on with your Saturday.
Oh, really? I thought there's so many more stories. We didn't even talk about the thing you wrote. You helped me write for Community.
Yeah. Let's
talk about.
What's that?
Well, let me a little nugget.
Yeah.
From my current life. So, you know, I worked on Rick and Morty. I worked on Loki. I have a new job now that I can't talk about yet. But what I will say is, and I'm about to start it. So I just had some like early meetings with the showrunner, and you know, I will be in like sort of a leadership role. I'll be running the room quite a bit, you know, sort of like guiding discussion, and so I wanted to know, you know, the ways in which they break story and write their show, and I just happened to mention, you know, I was like, I'm familiar with like all the models for writing, or most of them, you know, like hero's journey, 3 act structure, blah blah blah, all that bullshit. And I said, do you guys use any of that? Because I didn't go through a screenwriting program. Like I just sort of like started doing it, and I'm sort of self-taught. And I'll just say, to your point, he was like, oh, thank God you didn't go through a screenwriting program, because he has run into some issues with people who have. And so that's all to say that, like, you don't need a formal education to be good at storytelling. And writing is a skill that you can get better at, and you can just hone. Storytelling is a thing that you can be born with a great ability to tell stories, and then script writing is just sort of the execution of storytelling. And if you can pull that off, you don't need to have gone through a formal education, like a formal program. You also can be any age, and you can just continue and get better at it. I mean, how many directors and writers like work until arthritis takes over? Like quite a few.
Yeah. And then past that, no, I mean, like, yeah, I was just thinking, for some reason, John Hughes came to mind today, and like he was like famously writing ad copy here in Chicago, and just was like, well, I'm gonna write now. And he would just like go away for the weekend in his office, his kids would say, and like come out with a brand new script that would then go into production, you know, within a few months. That's not common, as you know, as someone who, what do you think your ratio is between like taking meetings, which I'm sure are all great, it's part of the job, doing general meetings and things that get produced?
I mean, it's 95-5. Like general meetings happen
Yeah.
all the time, and they're more about like gauging personality and sort of
Mhm.
because like these projects will go for years. So you're just trying to like like me too. I'm trying to feel out different executives and like studios and see if it's just like a vibe check. It's like, do I vibe with this person? Do they make me excited? Can I imagine myself working with them for years? That's what the general meetings are. And then it's different when I have a project that I'm trying to shop around, then it's like they're not exactly pitch meetings, but they're a little more than general meetings. So that's where you go like, I have a project, they've likely read it or they've read a synopsis of it, or they're excited to hear about it because maybe there's not a lot of literature to read. And those meetings are a little more like actionable, where at the end of the meeting, it's like, it ends with them saying like, we'll look into this possibility further, or we'd love to talk to you more about this. Or, they go like, oh, you've given us a lot to think about. And then it's like, then it's over. But most of the meetings I do are general meetings that are just like the turnover of executives in this. And so there's like unlimited numbers of production companies. And then there's, separate from that, there's streamers, and then there's networks that are different from production companies, and they all have executives, and they all turn over executives like on a 2-year cycle. So I've been kind of like legitimately a writer since about 2012, we'll say. So 10 years now. So I've seen like 5 waves of executives shuffle around. So general meetings are always like about when a new executive gets hired, they want to meet everyone in town. They want to, so they go to the agencies and say like, I'm putting out an all call for general meetings. And then they have 5 weeks of general meetings, and you're one of the people who slides in there. And sometimes you can really feel like you're just one of the people sliding into a time slot. It is. I mean, I had a guy once. It was for an animation studio, and it was right when the pandemic hit, and I was wearing sweatpants, and I joked about like, oh, how's doing meetings on Zoom? It's nice to wear sweatpants, huh? And he got very serious, and he was like, no, I still put on nice clothes, and I think everyone should, because it proves you respect the job and you respect the person you're talking to. And I'm just like, in my sweatpants, and I was like, oh, okay. And then afterwards, I was like, is he right? I don't know. But then my agent sent me a drawing, and I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, while you were meeting with him, he doodled this picture of you, and he wanted you to have it. And I was like, the guy who lectured me about wearing nice clothes in a Zoom meeting doodled a picture of me and had like the gall, and also was so like oblivious that he was like, yes, send him this bad doodle I did of him during the meeting. So sometimes you meet with people and they're just doodling you.
I thought that was going to be, that's funny. I thought that was going to be a story of like, he drew a picture of you in sweatpants as like sort of a, dig at you. But him doing a doodle that he thought merited sending to you through your agent is on the next level.
Yeah, it's almost a psychopath move.
Yeah.
That's all to say.
Wild.
Business is a bunch of garbage, and you can cut through all of it by just not waiting for someone to decide your work is worthy to be made, and just on whatever level you can make your own projects, because that's what I did. That got me into the industry. Those little short 5-minute narratives are what got me hired to do webisodes, which is what got me hired to write actual television. So that was the path I took, and that path is wide open to everyone still. But now, you know better than anyone, like the tools exist to make everything look like a real movie. So you're doing the right thing. And
that's what we're
anyone
trying
who donates
to do
you
here.
is doing an even better thing. Because I got to tell you,
Yeah, you're
as one of Jake's closest friends, if not his closest, he needs this.
I do. I do. I have to prove my worth as an artist by creating this thing. So, and you are my best friend next to Suzanne. So we should wrap this up mostly because I got to take one of my kids to a birthday party. And I could talk to you for another hour just about all this, but I am going to wrap it up by doing two things. One, saying, if you haven't contributed and you'd like to, you can do so, and we are going to make this movie, and we'd love to have your help. And two is, I'm going to close out by saying something. I have said this to Tom in person. This isn't like I would never compliment him to his face, but once you know Tom's writing, and you know, put on your hood to blunt the compliment, but Tom has written on a couple things. He mentioned Rick and Morty, Loki, and Tom's writing is heart with a little bit of like sharpness in the joke, but a lot of heart driving that. And like, so legitimately my favorite Rick and Morty episodes are the ones like that have your name on it, or the jokes I'd be like, oh, that's a Tom joke. And even over on Loki, which is like a much bigger machine, but that first season, you're like, I feel like that's a Tom line. And I would be like, was that you? And you'd be like, you're not one to trumpet your own horn, but you're like, yeah. And he wrote, I think, kind of the fan favorite of Loki season 1, episode 5, Journey into Mystery, which has the great Richard Grant as classic Loki and some great moments with him. And so, yeah, if you see Tom's name on something, check it out, because he is not a writer by training, but a writer by blood, I suppose. I'll try to come up with like a less hokey way.
I'm going to interrupt your
off
real quick and just say that, like, whenever you see a credited writer on a TV show, it's the work of a lot of writers in a writer's room, and everything that I've written is stories that are broken as a group, refined as a group, jokes are punched up as a group, and sometimes your stuff shines through still. But I just want to say that, like, everything you mentioned is like the work of a lot of really talented, very funny people, hardworking people.
And the Rick and Morty room was largely Channel 101 people, which goes into just a bunch of people that started doing it because they liked it. It was what they wanted to do.
Yeah, the first 2 seasons and half of the 3rd season all came from Channel 101.
Which is really awesome. So yeah, check out Channel 101 if you want to see like sort of, I guess like sort of one of the genesis of a lot of the comedy that came out in the last few years. A lot of faces and a lot of talent carried on. All right, Tom. Well, thanks a lot for doing this today. I know it was early for you.
That's fine.
And I hope you have a great rest of the day. There's NFL playoffs today, right?
Who cares? Fortified Film. Donate. Have me back. We could tell more stories. We didn't even talk about the stuff you wrote.
We should tell. Maybe we should pop on here and talk the Chevy and Joel community.
There's a lot of stories. I got a lot of stories if people want to hear them. So.
Oh yeah, if you want to hear them, message us and tell us. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Tom. Really
Bye,
appreciate
Ross.
it.
Bye, everyone else who is watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.